Jelson's workplace savings. So let me tell you a little bit about pensions and savings. What is a pension? Well, a pension is a long-term savings plan, very similar to any other types of saving you would do with a bank or building society, but there's benefits with a pension. The main benefit being that it's a tax-efficient savings plan, there's tax relief on your personal contributions, the fund that you're investing in has got potential for growth. When you come to retirement, you can take 25% of that fund you've built up as a tax-free lump sum. Income will only be taxed at your marginal rate, i.e. the tax rate when you retire, and any funds that are payable upon death are usually outside of your estate for inheritance tax. So Legal & General did a recent survey around retirement and looked at what makes a happy retirement, and there's some interesting results. 49% believe that having financial security is important. 43% feel that spending more time with their family and friends is important. Having a hobby or activity that you enjoy, 41%, so out on the golf course all day. Finding a purpose in something other than work, 38%. And making sure you interact with other people regularly, 35%. So a lot of us don't think about what we do when we get to retirement, we just think about the financial impact. But if you imagine on retirement, it's 365 days a year of not working. Could you spend 365 days a year on the golf course? Probably not. So, 6 key retirement income planning questions. So what do people ask us as financial planners? One is, how much money will I need when I get to retirement? When will I retire? Do I go at 55? Do I wait till 60? And as we've seen, more people now are working longer and longer. So the state pension age that used to be 65 has increased, 66, 67. And there's even talk about it going to 70. And we're finding that the workplace is structurally changing, where people are working longer through the late 60s into the 70s. If we look at certain companies, some companies now recruit predominantly from the retirement market. How much income have you already built up? So what other plans have you got in place? And they may not just be pension plans, they may be ISAs, national savings, property that you might downsize when the kids have left, if they ever leave. How much will it cost to make any income shortfall? So what do I need to make up when I get to retirement? And do you need to change your plans? How often do you look at what your plans are in retirement? State pension. So the state will provide, and as I said earlier on, the state pension will start providing at a later date. So 67 for a lot of us now, 68, and potentially going on to 70. The state pension in the UK at the moment is based on you paying national insurance contributions for 35 years of your working life. That's going to be longer. There's been changes that have been going to be made from the next budget, which will mean that we continue to pay national insurance potentially even into retirement. The annual pension is £9,339 per year. So you know you're going to get that in retirement from the state at the moment. So what else do you need to maintain your current standard of living when you get to retirement? Life expectancy is an issue, and that's what the big impact on increasing the state pension age has all been around the funding of the state pension and how long we live. And as we know now, we're living a lot longer. Better diets, more exercise, medical advancements. Obviously, we've had 18 months of not much medical advancement with COVID, but we are living longer. A 65-year-old man on average now will live until he's 84. 65-year-old woman will live until an average of 86. So we're living a lot longer. And that has an impact, therefore, on the amount of time in retirement that we're going to need income for. So how long do we need that income for? Well, if you looked at back in 1917, the Queen at the time, or probably wasn't the Queen, actually it would have been the King, sent out 24 happy birthday cards to those that hit 100. In 1952, that was 255. By 2011, 9,736 people received a card from the Queen congratulating him on the 100th birthday. And by 2035, that figure would jump to 110,000. So when you think about it, whereas one time you retire at 65, By 70, that was it, he'd passed away. Now we're likely to live for 20, 30 odd years into retirement, meaning our needs for income are going to be a lot longer than they ever have been. So what can we do when we get to retirement? What do pensions allow us to do? Well, the government brought in flexibility, which allows us now to do what we want with our pension pot when we get, at the moment, to the age 55. We can take a fixed income for life. You've probably heard that as annuity. We can enjoy flexible income, so we can take bits from our pension pot as and when we need it. And that's great because it means you can take more income out in your early years of retirement, which can be more important to you than your latter years of retirement. You can take cash sums. Like we said, 25% of it will be tax-free. However, you've got to be careful because the rest of it will be taxable. Or you can leave it, particularly if you're going to continue working or you've got other assets to use to generate income. What help is there for you? Well, there's help from panels, your advisors who will give you guidance on retirement options, but equally the government have put in place an organisation known as PensionWise, and they will give you free guidance in your retirement and talk about the options you've got with your pension schemes. So let's talk about the pension provider that we use. So we use a company called the People's Pension, known as the Building and Civil Engineering Pension Group, and their background is over 75 years. Traditionally, they were in the construction industry, and they dealt with the old savings schemes, particularly the holiday pay. So in 2012, when auto enrolment was launched, they felt that they were ideally placed as a pension provider to provide a workplace pension to employees, particularly those employees that may change jobs. So the good thing about the People's Pension is, firstly, there's a very portable scheme. So should you shift employer, you take your pot of money to the next employer, particularly in the building industry. The People's Pension won a number of awards. They're a mutual organisation based in the UK with a call centre in the UK, and they're a de facto rated company of 5 stars. So pensions make a charge for the money that you invest. All pensions make a charge, and that charge is based on the fund value that you've got built up in your pension over a period of time. Now, the government introduced a cap on that charge, which was 0.75%. The great news is the People's Pension at 0.5%, and then as you build your pot up, it reduces. So for example, if you've got over £3,000 in your pension pot and up to £10,000, your annual management charge is reduced by 0.1. That means you're only being charged 0.4% on any funds above the 3,000. And that goes down even further. So if you built up over 50,000 in your pension pot, you're paying an effective charge of 0.2% on your pension fund. It's one of the lowest charging pension schemes. Okay, so let's move on to performance. Now, every workplace pension has what they call a default fund, and that's the fund that you'll automatically be put into when you join the company. And the default fund for the People's Pension is called the Global Investment up to 85% Share Fund. And let's have a look at the performance over the last 6 months, year, 3 years and 5 years. So if we look at 5 years, and this is the end of June this year, performance has been 59.4%. The benchmark is 31.39%. Even if we look over the last 12 months, performance has been 20.4% for the People's Pension Default Fund, and the benchmark is 6.07. So you can see there the People's Pension Default Fund is performing far better than the benchmark that's been set. And that's important. The good news to you as an employee is that's reviewed every 12 months with your employer when we conduct the annual governance. So what happens in that default fund? Your money is invested in various assets. And as you get closer to retirement, in fact within 15 years of retirement or your chosen retirement date, then the assets that your money is invested in will reduce in risk. What that means to you is there's less volatility when you get to retirement. In respect of your options, you're not tied to that one fund. So although there is a default fund, you have choices. And you can have a choice. You can have an adventurous fund, which takes a higher risk. You can have a cautious fund that takes a lower risk, or even an ethical fund. And what we're finding now more and more is that people are looking at the environmental, social and governance issues that face the economy, particularly as we strive for a carbon neutral society. So ethical funds are becoming a lot more important. There's a Sharia compliant fund, and there's a cash and annuity fund. So there are choices. So let's talk about attitude to risk. Attitude to risk. Reward is linked to the risk that you take. So the greater the reward you want, the greater the risk you've got to take. And when you look at pension funds, they invest in lots of different types of assets. The reason for that is to spread the risk as you go through and up to your retirement. You start at the bottom, which is very cautious. And very cautious would be cash. Cash as an asset is very safe, particularly if it's in my pocket because it doesn't come out very often. But that risk will increase, particularly over time, because of inflation. Recently, it's just been announced that inflation rates are likely to go above 4%. So that means the value of your money each year is buying 4% less than it did the year before. We've then got the top end of risk, which is speculative. A speculative asset may be some kind of bet for the races. Now, a speculative asset means just that there is that risk. Values go down as well as up, so you can lose part of your capital. And then we drop down into the middle, a balanced risk portfolio. Now, a balanced risk asset would be something like a mixture of different shares in different companies. Still an element of risk, but not as high as a speculative investment would be. Between that, we have cautious and we have adventurous, which would include things like government bonds on the cautious side and things like property and commodities on the adventurous side. The idea now behind a default fund, therefore, is to mix your investment across those different asset types so it creates a balance of risk. It's important, therefore, that you go online. As soon as you get your pack to join the People's Pension, on that pack, it gives you a code or password for you to access the online account. Why is it important? Because if you don't go online, how will you ever know how much you've got in your pension scheme and how can you plan? So by going online, you can see how much your pension is worth. You can see how it's performed over a period of time. Equally, if your attitude to risk is different from that you've put in the default fund, then you can change the fund that you invest. And there's no cost for transferring from one fund to another. You can also get the fund fact sheets up that tell you how performance has been. Retirement age, like we said earlier on, people retiring a lot later. Some will still go earlier, but you can change your retirement age on the scheme. And that's important because if the risk is going to be reduced 15 years before your retirement date, if you've got the wrong retirement date, then your 15-year profile will start sooner or later than you want it to do. And finally, you need to nominate your beneficiary. If should something happen to you, whatever pot you've built up within your pension will be paid to your nearest and dearest, tax-free. So it's important you nominate your beneficiary online and you keep that up to date. So how does it look setting up your account online? Well, it's quick and it's easy to do. And I've put a link there for a video you can access that talks through the process. The video is only a couple of minutes long, so please have a look. So we're probably going to have pensions with other companies. If you've worked with other employers, and I think on average we're likely to work with 6 to 8 different employers throughout our working life, and that's increasing. You don't have a job for life, unless you're here at Jelson's, obviously. You'll have built up a pension scheme somewhere else. And there's benefits of transferring pension schemes from one provider to another. 1, it's easier to manage. 2, lower charges. So it means your pot of money, less is being taken away every year. Access to your pension. The People's Pension have got all the different flexibilities built into it when you come to retirement, whereas some of the older pension schemes haven't got those flexibilities built in. And it's a modern fund. So the default fund is designed with today in mind and obviously your future requirements as you get to retirement. But there are some disadvantages. You can lose guarantees on old pension schemes. There could be penalties if you transfer across. Could be a higher charge in the new pension scheme than your old scheme. And there's no guarantee you're going to be better off at the end of the day. So if you've got an old pension scheme, then what I recommend is you get the details from your pension provider and then we can provide some guidance around the options. Contributions, that's important. Your growth of your pension pot will depend on a number of factors. It will depend on how much the pension company is charging you for investing in money. It will depend on how well that money grows over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. It would depend on how long you've got the money in the pension scheme, and it would depend on how much goes into the pension. Now, when the government introduced auto-enrolment in 2012, they introduced a phased contribution level. That level at the moment is set at 3% from the employer and 5% from the employee. Earlier on we talked about tax relief, so that 5% you pay, you actually only pay 4% from your pay, and the additional tax relief is added on by the pension provider. So in total we've got 8% going into your pension scheme based on your qualifying earnings. You can pay more into your pension, and the benefit of paying more is, one, you're building a bigger lump sum up for when you get to retirement, and two, it's tax efficient. The tax man doesn't give much away, so it's worth taking advantage when he does give it away. So to summarise, we all need a decent pension when we retire. Your employer is helping you. Not only they're helping you in the sense that they're contributing to your pension, but they're providing educational pieces like this. And it's something that will continue. The state will help, but it's unlikely to be enough. You need to work out your retirement plan. So you need a target and review your attitude to risk. Does the fund that you're in match your attitude to risk and your capacity for loss?
Right, thanks Andy for that presentation. There's just a few questions that I'd like to ask, if you could clarify these for me.
Yeah, sure.
So what happens to my pension pot should I die?
Okay, so on death, whatever you've built up in your pension scheme is payable to your beneficiary or your estate, and it's paid out tax-free, so there's nothing going to be taken away from the pot you've built up. And that's why it's importantly that you actually go online to nominate your beneficiary. It makes it easier then for the trustees of the pension scheme, the people's pension, to pay that money straight away to your nearest and dearest without having to wait for things like probate or the will.
If I draw my money when I retire, will it all be taxed?
Right, with lump sums, or when you come to withdraw your pension, we talked earlier on about there's lots of different the flexibilities now with withdrawing from your pension scheme, and you can draw it all as one lump sum. But what you've got to remember, Lee, is that only 25% of what you've built up is initially tax-free. However, you've got a personal allowance, i.e. a level of income that you can earn every single year for the rest of your life. And at the moment, that's around about 12,500. So if you draw out over and above that 25% tax-free, that additional amount you draw out will go against your personal allowance. Now, if you've not used your personal allowance that year, so let's say, for example, you've retired a year before your state pension age, you've got no further income coming in, you could take another 12,500 from your pension pot without any tax liability. So you can phase your income in so it's as tax efficient as possible.
How much more can I pay into my pension?
You can pay in up to what you earn, but there is a limit, and that limit is 40,000. So for example, if I earned 30,000 a year, I could put 30,000 into the pension scheme. It wouldn't leave me very much to go out, but I could put 30,000. But the limit is 40,000 a year. So for example, if you received a lump sum, a legacy from somebody, there's nothing stopping you putting that into your pension scheme up to that limit, and the benefit too is you get tax relief on that lump sum. So if I wanted to put £10,000 into a pension scheme, yeah, with basic rate tax relief, it's like only putting 8,000 into it.
If I'm a high rate taxpayer, do I get 40% relief?
Yes, you do, but automatically you will get basic rate tax relief, i.e. your 20%. If you're a high rate taxpayer, you have to reclaim the additional 20% back, and you have to reclaim that every single year via a tax return. Now, a lot of people don't do that. So can you claim back previous years? Yes, you can. Normally, HMRC or the tax office will accept a claim back for the last 4 years. So if you haven't filled a tax return in to claim that 20% back, then you need to do it, and you can claim back for up to 4 years.
How do I opt out?
Quite simple. When you're putting in the pension scheme, when you join the company, your employer, you'll receive communication from the People's Pension. That communication will have a contact number and online access, and you opt out directly with the People's Pension, not through your employer. So the chances are is that when you do join the company and put in the pension scheme, that one contribution may have come out of your pay by the time you've decided to opt out. You've got 30 days to opt out from receipt of the notification from the pension provider. And once you do opt out, any contributions that have been made out of pay will be refunded.
If I should opt out, can I opt back in?
Yeah, of course you can. Now it's up to the employer. What the regulator says is that every 3 years you will be opted back in whether you like it or not. Tough, all right? So if you want to opt out at the end of the 3 years, you'd have to go through the process of opting out again. However, within that 3-year period, if you decided because of a change in life circumstances that you wanted to go back into the pension scheme, you can. You need to let your employer know in writing that you want to rejoin the scheme, and they will put you in from the next pay date or the next pay reference period. What you can't do though, and this is up to employer really, you can't keep going in and out within the same year. So your employer has an obligation to allow you to join that scheme again once every 12-month period.
How do I know what's in my pension pot?
Earlier on, we talked about going online and logging on as soon as you get that letter from the People's Pension. When you go online, you can look to see what the value of your pot is daily if you want to. Most people will look at it at least every 6 months just to see how the money's performing. But equally, as well as looking at what the value is, you can then go into the fund itself and what we call the fund fact sheet online, and you can see how that fund is performing over different periods of time.